so many of us are starting to have a greater awareness that there is a shift that needs to take place, but maybe we're unsure of what that shift looks like. We might be unsure of what that shift feels like, okay? And I know for many, what's happening now is because we are in a time period where we've actually come into on the earth where we are starting to experience the identity shift. And as we're asking ourselves these questions about who am I and what do I really want to do or be in my life, it's because we're hitting these new frequencies that are kind of shaking loose the distortions of this old reality that we've been playing in, that we had thought was a reality that was, you know, who we really were. And coming to find out that that is not who we were. That was just a storyline that we were playing out. So in other words, we're looking at this from a generational lineage perspective, going back to times where we were handed down different stories about you know, how women had to behave, how men had to act. And that's what's coming up now. And in many instances, it's going to start to tap into our sense of being, our state of being, our sense of security, who we perceive ourselves to be, so that we can let go of who we are not. Some of this is going to play out for us in how we're viewing ourselves and what that looks like in relationship to others. Okay, so as we're going through this process and we feel ourselves measuring ourselves against others in our reality, one of the best things that we could do is, in that moment that we're going through that, have the awareness that we're actually having a moment where we are very, very clear that we are feeling less than. We are clear that we are measuring ourselves against what we're perceiving for another, from another, by another, okay? And as we're doing that, holding an awareness that speaks to the fact that that is not our truth. So it would sound like, well, I'm feeling that I don't really matter in this situation or as much, or I'm feeling that I'm going to be judged on how smart I am, or how good I look, or how well I'm doing my job. And in that moment, the work would be this. As you're having that awareness and that thought is coming to the forefront, you would stop yourself and say, the only person that is mattering to, that is important to, right here, right now, is me. Because I'm holding an old belief that is tying me to these feelings that I'm having. And if I look around at the bigger picture, nobody cares. The only one that cares here is me. So if you find yourself judging yourself, acknowledge that you're judging yourself in whatever way. Step back from that moment that you're judging yourself. And then have this realization that in the reality that you're playing in, the only one that is judging you is you. Because nobody else around you is paying attention close enough to judge you. The only time someone will step into your reality to judge you is if you're calling them in for the experience that you need to have in being judged, so that you can then heal it at a deeper level. Okay? And when you are perceiving yourself as being judged in whatever way, I want you to come to an understanding that that judgment, that belief about judgment, is held in a distorted reality. It is held in a third dimensional reality that is not your truth. It has never been your truth. It is only the game in which we came here to play. So when we see things like the election, for instance, and we see the chaos that is being created now by the election fraud that's taking place, we have to look at it, we have to smile, and we have to say it is just part of the illusion that I am stepping out of, that I am no longer actively participating in, while the third dimension starts to deconstruct and dissolve from my field. Because in this process of us awakening, we are not only anchoring those light codes from Solaris, the sun, into our field for the Christed light, but we are also anchoring them into the new paradigm, the new platform that we are building of New Earth. And the more we can have these higher level awarenesses that separate us out of the old distortions, that separate us from creating more separation within ourselves and between each other, the more our experiences in our reality will be from a higher level perspective, because we will not be running the old distortion. Where more and more people are starting to shift away from that third dimensional perspective, that third dimensional paradigm. So that old earth paradigm, right, that was playing in duality and polarity. And so if we look at that, right, it's very hard to shift out of that frequency, because polarity and duality is what we've known our whole entire lives. Our electromagnetic field is built on that, right? Our belief systems are embedded in that polarity, right? So because we're playing in a reality where there can be bad things, that there can be something bad. And most people have come in not wanting to believe that, but yet it is a very true reality. But because of many, many factors, we're finding now, we're seeing now, and we will be seeing as we get more into the end of the year, more people starting to access these higher states of consciousness where they're starting to look at things and say, nothing is making sense to me. And it's not because the things are not making sense. It's because they're being activated by those of us that are just choosing to hold the higher timeline. In other words, we don't need to argue with them because their field is getting filled and amplified. Their light codes are activating. The key codes are activating merely by our presence being around them. And the more we hold the light, the higher the light quotient is on the earth, the distortion cannot be fed anymore. So that's why it's important for us to hold these higher states of consciousness. Okay. And so we have to remember that the third dimension was specifically created for the purpose of being a polarized field. In other words, it is magnetic in its right? It is a magnetic field. And that magnetic field is attached to Gaia, is associated to Gaia. And when we come through the birthing process, we jump into these body suits, which are light bodies now, but these were carbon-based body suits. And these body suits had to have that same electromagnetic field because we're a composite makeup of Gaia. We're of the earth. So we have that same electromagnetic field, which allows us to play in that polarized field where something could be good, but there could also be something bad. And then that state of duality just means that we exist in that duality. We've been trained in that duality. Our consciousness, our mind is aware that there are good things in this world and there are bad things in this world. There are good people in this world and there are bad people in this world, right? And so we're constantly reminded of that. How many of you heard from your parents when you were young and you laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed, and all of a sudden your parents couldn't hear it anymore and they would be like, don't laugh too much because you'll be crying shortly after that, right? I mean, I heard that from my parents all the time. And I always thought, like, what the hell does that mean? I'm happy. Why would I want to cry after that? Right? I never understood that. Never, like I think back at some of the stuff and I just was like, what the hell was, but yet that was the story. It was like a parrot repeating, hello, hello. Or, people teach their parrots to say, I'm a pretty boy, right? That's what we've done our whole entire lives. We've been repeating everything that has been handed down to us. Like parrots, we've been repeating all of it, right? So that ties into the thoughts that we're feeling about ourselves. We can't get away from them. They're embedded in our field. That electromagnetic field magnetizes those thoughts because, again, think about this. Thoughts are electric, right? So it's the electric spark. That's why they want to run off into the future. Thought wants to run off in the future, right? And I'm going to say this. I know some of you have heard this 1,000 times from me, but I'm saying this for the new people that are on the call, whether new listening in or on listening to the replay. But thoughts are electric. They're a spark. It's like you sticking the key in the ignition of your car. It sparks the electrical charge, right? And if you think about a thought like a sprinter, that sprinter, here's the gun, it's off and running. It's not thinking, it's not asking you, where do you want me to go? It's just running, right? That's how a thought is. It just runs right out into the future. And before you know it, you're 2 years out in the future, 3 years out in the future. You worry, maybe 20 years out in the future, worrying about what your health is going to look like in 20 years, right? Because that thought is off and running and it does not know how to stop. It just doesn't. All it knows is it's winning the race, right? That's what a sprinter does. And then here comes the emotional body. And the emotional body, well, the emotional body is magnetic and it wants to catch that electrical sprinter because it magnetizes to everything electric. So here comes the magnetic body, which is emotional, right? It's the emotional body, right? It wants to catch the thought, but it can't. Because it's not a sprinter. It's a heavy, dense, big body of energy. It's magnetics with a huge magnetic pull. And if you look at the magnetics of the emotional body, it's like a sumo wrestler. Very, very dense. Is it going to run as fast as a sprinter? No, it's not. It can't. So when your thoughts are all the way out in the future and your thoughts are out there and your emotional body is really stressed to try to catch up with your thoughts, that is anxiety being created. Do you see that? Right? That's how we create anxiety. So stopping anxiety would be to keep our thoughts present, right? Because the electrical spark that is like the ignition of the car, in order to get the car to go, you then need to give it gas, right? That would be the sumo wrestler. So we have to look at all of this and keep it in its context because it's all us. Every bit of it is us, right? The good, the bad, and the crazy is us.